Hey guys, tonight we slip into the foggy, soot-smudged streets of 17th-century Paris, where cobblestones are slick with yesterday's rain, and the air smells faintly of horse bread and someone definitely emptying a chamber pot above your head. It's still dark out. The church bells haven't chimed yet. The baker's oven hasn't cracked open. The poets, the pickpockets, and the perfume sellers are all still dreaming, mostly of things you can't afford. And you? You're already awake. You're not a noble. You're not a merchant. You're not even a baker. You're a street sweeper. You trudge down creaking wooden stairs, careful not to wake the neighbor's cat or the man who snores so loud through the wall it might be considered artillery. You step out into the chill and pull your wool shawl tight. You've patched it 4 times. It might last the winter. You might not. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city is still a murmur. You pass a sleeping drunk curled under a cart, a pile of soot-black snow still clinging to the corners. A rat scampers over your boot. You don't flinch. You're used to them. Bold, arrogant creatures, like tiny kings. Your hands are stiff with cold as you dig through the small storage nook behind your building, a cupboard of twisted broom handles, broken baskets, and an old scarf someone's probably still looking for. You choose your broom, a bundle of twigs bound tight with cord, its shaft worn smooth where your fingers grip it. Beside it, your other essentials, a rusted dustpan of hammered tin, a small sack for ash, and a bucket for, well, everything else. You lift it all, adjusting your load like a seasoned acrobat, and make your way toward Rue Saint-Denis. Here's your mainstream fact. By the 1600s, Paris was home to thousands of street cleaners, many employed by parish councils or paid by homeowners to keep their front steps free of waste, mud, and the delightful gifts left by horses and humans alike. Your job isn't glamorous, it isn't respected, but the truth is, without you, the city drowns. The cobbles are slick underfoot and you take short steps, mindful of yesterday's storm. You sidestep a puddle the size of Normandy, pass under a sagging archway, and wave to an old woman setting out stale bread for the pigeons. She doesn't wave back. You're used to that too. There's a superstition about you. Street sweepers are considered unlucky by some. Bad omens. After all, you deal with waste, with death sometimes, with things polite society pretends don't exist. You reach your first alley just as the sky hints at pale blue. It's narrow, brick-walled, and already smells faintly of vinegar and urine. Someone's dumped a pile of fish bones beside a door. You sigh. Your broom hits the stones with that familiar rhythm. Sweep, scrape, push, drag. You move with the focus of someone who's done this 1,000 times and will likely do it 1,000 more. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some districts, street sweepers developed unofficial territories and treated encroachments with the same seriousness as gang turf. Some carried wooden whistles or painted their buckets to mark their patch. You've got a little red ribbon tied around your broom handle. You don't talk about it, but you notice when someone else tries to sweep your corner. A cart rattles past you, drawn by a sleepy-eyed mule and a man yelling fresh milk to absolutely no one. The mule ignores you. The man doesn't. Out of the way, filth keeper, he barks. You nod. Better not to answer. Better to keep sweeping. You clear the last of the alley just as the sky turns the color of old pewter. Smoke trickles from chimneys. Somewhere a dog starts barking like it's his job. Somewhere else, a window shutters close just as you look up. And you smile, because the city is waking, and so is the mess. The wind picks up as you haul your tools toward your next stop, rattling a loose shutter and blowing a ragged bit of paper across the cobblestones. You stab it down with your broom, flip it into your tin pan, and keep moving. 1 down, thousands to go. You pass under a crooked stone archway where a candle flickers in a tiny wall niche, probably lit by someone who fears the dark or rats or both. You nod to it out of habit. A silent ritual, like knocking wood or crossing fingers. Paris is full of superstitions, and you've picked up more than a few. Your next alley is waiting, wider than the first, but just as dirty. You set your bucket down with a clunk and stretch your back. The morning stiffness hasn't worn off yet, and your knees crack like a loaf of day-old bread. One good stretch, one cracked vertebra, and you're ready. You begin sweeping again, a steady rhythm, broom bristles rasping against uneven stone. You find your pace, your breath. You don't have time to think about how long the day is going to be. You just move. Here's your mainstream fact. 17th century Paris had no centralized waste system. Each neighborhood, or quartier, was responsible for its own streets, with sweepers often paid by the house or block. The wealthier the area, the better the broom work. Your quartier? Not wealthy, which means the streets are yours and yours alone. You take inventory as you go. Tools, waste, obstacles. You adjust the grip on your broom's handle, already slick with dew. A rag tucked into your belt serves double duty as both sweat wiper and emergency mop. The bucket bumps against your leg with every step, half full with ash, chicken bones, and something you suspect was once fruit. And then you come to the worst part of the alley, the chamber pot zone. You call it that because every morning without fail, someone, and you suspect it's always the same person, empties their pot from the third-floor window without looking or caring. You glance up, cautiously. The shutters are closed. You step forward, fast. A faint splash hits the stones behind you. You don't look back. You just mutter, "Missed again," and keep sweeping. Here's your quirky tidbit. Chamber pots were often dumped straight onto the street, sometimes with a shouted warning, "Gardez l'eau." Literally, watch out for the water. Though many skipped that part. Street sweepers became masters of dodging incoming surprises. You round the corner and nod to a woman scrubbing her doorstep with vinegar and water. She pauses long enough to scowl at you, then goes back to scrubbing. People don't like to be reminded that their front steps get filthy overnight. You are, unfortunately, the reminder. Still, she didn't throw anything. That's a win. Further down, you spot a bundle of straw stuffed between two bricks. You pry it out with the tip of your broom and find half a fish carcass and 3 teeth inside. You blink. You sweep it up without asking questions. Historians still argue whether the role of street sweepers was considered part of the urban lower class or a separate caste altogether. Some records suggest sweepers had their own informal guilds. Others imply they were little more than hired hands who could be replaced at will. You know where you stand. Replaceable, perhaps, but dependable. As you work, the city begins to buzz. A bell tolls from the nearby church. The blacksmith 2 streets over begins hammering. The woman with the shrillest voice in the quarter begins shouting about bread prices again. It's comforting, in a strange way. Predictable chaos. You pause to stretch again. Your broom leans against your leg like an old friend. The sun is climbing, the alleys are waking, and so are the flies. A carriage rattles by at the street's end, painted gold and green, the kind reserved for someone with a powdered wig and opinions. It doesn't stop. It never does. But the horses do. You sigh. You know what's next. You take a deep breath, hoist your bucket, and start sweeping toward the latest deposit. Because in this job, if it's on the street, it's yours. By the time you reach Rue de la Harpe, the city has fully awakened. Smoke curls from bakeries, apprentices carry sacks twice their size, and someone already smells faintly of onions and bad decisions. You adjust your grip on the broom and brace yourself. This street always puts up a fight. Your first challenge isn't the trash, it's the foot traffic. The cobblestones here are tight with boots, hooves, heels, and at least one barefoot child chasing a hoop made from a cracked barrel ring. You wait for a gap and dive in, broom sweeping ahead of you like a ship's prow parting stormy seas. Bits of straw, cloth, and yesterday's turnip peel shuffle obediently aside. Then someone shouts, "Look out below!" You step left, just in time for a small stream of something unspeakable to splash where your boot had been. No gardez l'eau that time. Just gravity doing its awful job. You mutter something under your breath, sweep it away, and keep moving. Here's your mainstream fact. Despite ordinances dating back to the 14th century, open dumping remained common practice in Paris well into the 17th century. Street sweepers were the frontline defense against public health hazards long before anyone knew the word sanitation. You know that word now. You are that word, even if no one says thank you. Near the butcher's stall, the smell is enthusiastic. Blood-dark cobbles, piles of offal, and a vague hum of flies so thick it sounds like a lullaby sung by bees. You hold your breath. Sweep faster. A boy hawks tripe pies with the kind of energy only children and demons possess. You dodge his greasy elbows, nearly collide with a nun carrying bread, and find a brief, holy moment of peace near the bread oven's back wall. You park your bucket there and sit on it for 10 seconds. Maybe 12. Then the fishmonger throws a bucket of slop into the gutter, and it splashes up your shin. You don't flinch anymore. You just say, "Good morning," and keep working. Here's your quirky tidbit. Sweepers sometimes carried perfumed cloths to tie over their faces. Not for style, but survival. A good vinegar-soaked kerchief could keep the worst stenches at bay. You have one. It smells like pickled cabbage. It does not help. Further down the street, you pass two gentlemen in long coats arguing about poetry. One steps directly into your fresh pile of swept filth. You stop. He stops. He looks down at his shoes. You brace for an insult. Instead, he says, "Quite an accurate metaphor for love." You blink. He tips his hat and walks on. You consider that a victory. Historians still argue whether Paris's street conditions truly reflected the chaos often described in contemporary journals, or whether such accounts were exaggerated to make political points. Based on your pant legs, you vote for truth. You spot a cat perched on a windowsill, eyeing you like it's your manager. You bow slightly. The cat does not return the gesture. No one ever does, except one woman, Madame Fournier. She sells ribbons and thread 2 alleys over. Every morning she sets out a bucket of clean water beside her stoop and nods to you as you pass. Today, she even offers a crust of yesterday's bread. You accept it with a nod and tuck it into your satchel. A feast for later. Your broom snags on a broken cobble. You kick the stone loose and toss it aside. Another job for someone else. You've got enough on your plate, like the heap of cabbage leaves and wet feathers outside the printer's shop. You sigh, then sweep. You keep sweeping, because it's what you do. The Latin Quarter greets you with its usual mix of spilled ink, discarded pamphlets, and loud opinions echoing off damp stone. You step around a group of students still tipsy from last night's wine, their powdered wigs askew, arguing about some philosopher you've never read and probably never will. One of them gestures so wildly he nearly smacks your broom out of your hands. He doesn't notice. You do. You sweep past them anyway, muttering, "Philosophy's lovely until it vomits on your doorstep." Your voice is low, mostly for you. But one student hears it and gives you a look of scandalized amusement, as if a street sweeper isn't allowed wit. You nod politely and move on. Here's your mainstream fact. The Latin Quarter, home to the University of Paris, was a hub of intellectual life in the 17th century. But it was also infamous for rowdy students, street fights, and drunken mischief, especially after sundown. And you're the one who has to clean it all up. You tackle Rue de la Montagne Sainte-Geneviève like it's a duel. The slope is steep, the debris plentiful. A broken wine jug glitters in the gutter. You sweep it carefully to avoid slicing your broom and your fingers. As you go, you collect the detritus of scholarly chaos, torn pages from lecture notes, scraps of parchment, a slipper, just one, and something you think might be an essay about love. It's stained with ink and something more mysterious. You don't ask questions. A cat darts between your ankles and disappears into a drain. You don't flinch. The city is alive, after all, and it's rarely in the mood to warn you. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers in academic districts learn to read basic Latin just by collecting thrown-out lecture notes. One even became a tutor later in life, allegedly after correcting a grammar mistake scribbled on a page tossed into his waste pile. You admire that, but you mostly just use the papers to line your boots when they start leaking. The alley behind the bookbinders is next. It always smells like glue and ambition. Today it's worse. Someone has dumped spoiled soup near the back door. You prod it with your broom, nose wrinkled, and find a slice of turnip still mostly intact. You nudge it into your bucket with grim dignity. A student brushes past you, hurrying toward class, cloak flapping like a banner. He doesn't apologize. Another one follows and slips on the same soup you just swept. That one curses. You say you're welcome. He scowls. You smile. Historians still argue whether student unrest in the Latin Quarter was a symptom of broader political unrest, or simply the eternal nature of young people with too much wine and too few consequences. Either way, it's your problem, at least until sunset. You pause beneath a cracked archway to rest your arms. The stones here are old, older than most buildings in the city. Someone carved a name into one. Etienne, 1602. You touch it lightly. Another hand, another broom, another year. You keep sweeping. As you round a corner, you come face to face with a priest delivering a sermon to 3 men and a stray chicken. His voice booms, echoing off the walls, declaring something about virtue and decay. You glance at the filth behind him. He does not. You wait until he moves on before tackling it. Your broom finds an apple core, a chicken feather, and a long smear of what you really hope is wine. You clean them in one practice sweep, then step aside as the wind carries the priest's words away like old smoke. He says, "The soul must be swept clean." You resist the urge to yell, "Start with Rue Lagrange." You won't, but you'll think it, because in the Latin Quarter ideas fly faster than pigeons. And you chase what they leave behind. You reach the edge of the Latin Quarter just as the market square begins its daily transformation, from stillness to chaos, from silence to song, from half-covered stalls to fully unleashed spectacle. The Rue Mouffetard market is already buzzing, though it's not quite mid-morning. You can smell it before you see it. Rotten cabbage, fresh onions, mud, wet wood, garlic, a whiff of old cheese, and underneath it all, the smell of human feet. You brace yourself. Here's your mainstream fact. Open-air markets in 17th century Paris were sprawling, vital centers of trade, and filth. Despite city laws mandating cleanliness, most stalls left behind more debris in an hour than a single sweeper could clear in a day. You nod at the produce women setting out radishes and leeks in woven baskets. One of them nods back. The other pretends not to see you. You step carefully between a pile of crushed grapes and a piece of stringy meat that might once have been something noble like rabbit or rat. A boy runs by yelling, "Apples! Apples! Get them while they're round!" He doesn't stop running, and 3 apples fall from his cart, one of them promptly squished beneath a passing boot. You sigh. The cobbles aren't even visible here, just layers of straw, wet paper, peelings, and feathers. Always feathers. Like some invisible chicken exploded last night and no one mentioned it. You start sweeping near the fishmonger's stall. Big mistake. It's not the fish that gets you. It's the guts. The slippery, unidentifiable organs leaking across the stones in gooey trails, as if they've made peace with their own afterlife. You hold your breath and get to work. The worst part isn't the guts. It's the debate. An old man and a cart woman are mid-argument about the freshness of a fish. He claims it winked at him. She claims he's drunk. You claim, silently, that they're both right. They don't notice you. No one ever does when there's drama. You sweep around them like water around rocks, collecting fish scales, parsley stems, broken glass, and half a wine cork. A baker drops a full sack of flour and a white cloud explodes like a saint sneezed. You're now covered in it. You blink. Your lashes feel crunchy. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers would rub a little oil or wax on their broom heads to help trap fine dust and flour. You meant to do that this morning. But oil costs money. Flour is apparently free. You work your way around the square, dodging eels, skirting spilled milk, and narrowly avoiding an entire pigeon that drops from a rooftop. You glance up. The pigeon is fine, just startled, unlike the tomato it landed in. You pause for water. Your own, not the pigeon's. And lean briefly against a wooden post. Your arms ache. Your back hums. Your fingers are stiff, but still wrapped tightly around your broom. A woman selling mushrooms tosses you a wink and a slightly squished apple. You bow slightly, sweep her stall clean first. She smiles. It's these small transactions, the unwritten, unspoken kinds, that make your day feel worth something. Historians still argue whether market sweepers were seen as public servants or expendable nuisances. Some records call them hommes utiles, useful men. Others call them invisibles. You tend to agree with both, depending on the hour. At the edge of the square, a dog growls over a bone that may or may not be part of today's stew. You wait until he's distracted, then sweep around him in a careful arc. A girl is playing hopscotch in the dust near your cleaned patch. You don't stop her. She jumps into your line of work, giggling, scattering straw and onion skins. You sigh, then you sweep it again, because that's what you do. Just past the market, the street narrows again. Less of a road, more of a suggestion. You step into the shade of tall buildings, leaning inward like old friends sharing secrets. Laundry lines stretch above your head, sagging with damp linens and the occasional pair of striped stockings that flaps like a defeated flag. You take a breath, shake the flour from your shoulders, and prepare yourself. This next part of your route winds through a quarter you know well, not for its charm, but for its social hierarchy. Because here, your broom brushes shoulders with velvet shoes. This is where the wealthy live, or at least, where they parade through. You round the corner and see it. A pristine carriage waiting in front of an ornate townhouse, gilt trim gleaming even in the muted light. A footman opens the door for a woman whose hat could house a family of birds. She steps down carefully, heel clicking on the curb. She sees you. Pauses, wrinkles her nose as though your presence might stain her perfume. You bow slightly, out of habit. She doesn't return it. You sweep the step after she's gone. Here's your mainstream fact. While noble classes in 17th century Paris rarely acknowledged laborers, their daily lives depended on them, especially street sweepers who prevented the buildup of filth, which could attract rats, spread disease, and offend delicate sensibilities. You do your job well, but you're not part of the picture. Around the next corner, you're met by someone who does acknowledge you, a servant girl with flour on her apron and a quiet, kind expression. "Watch the step," she whispers, nodding toward a pile of slush and broken crockery. You nod, grateful. She ducks back inside before anyone sees her speak to you. You sweep the pile carefully, shards of blue pottery mixed with egg yolk and what might be a crushed lemon tart. You pause, consider it, then sweep it away. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some street sweepers in wealthier districts were bribed by house servants to sweep a little slower or faster, depending on who they wanted to inconvenience. A fast sweep could clear a path for a favored guest. A slow one could ensure an enemy's shoes got ruined. You've played both sides. Sweeping, after all, is political. Further down, a pair of boys in matching coats toss chestnut shells into the street just as you pass. One snickers. The other drops a peel on purpose. You sweep it up calmly. Then, with great ceremony, sweep around them in a perfect circle and leave them standing on a clean patch of stone. "Merci," you say sweetly. They blink. One looks unsure whether he's been insulted. You move on. You pass a perfume shop, spilling jasmine into the air. It mingles with horse dung and chimney smoke and the faint, lingering scent of fish from earlier. Your nose doesn't react anymore. It's part of the job. You sweep under a balcony where two noblemen argue about taxes. You catch words like levy and petition and unacceptable burden. You glance at the manure you're clearing and try not to laugh. Historians still argue whether members of the aristocracy truly understood the city's working class, or whether their complaints about taxation came more from inconvenience than empathy. Either way, they rarely paid attention to the people holding brooms. As you round a final corner, you find a curious sight. A boy, maybe 10, sitting on a stoop, chin in hand, watching you work. His clothes are clean, too clean for this street. You pause. He doesn't look away. After a moment, he says, "Do you get bored?" You blink. "No," you say. Truthfully, just tired. He considers this, then nods. You hand him the broom. He hesitates, then takes it. Tries a few strokes. Lopsided. Too fast. Uneven. But not bad. You take it back gently. "You'll ruin your shoes," you say. He grins, then runs off. And you keep sweeping because there's still dust in the cracks, and someone has to care about it. Your stomach reminds you it's well past time for lunch. It growls, a low, echoing protest that reverberates through your ribs like a minor church bell. You pat your side pouch where today's prize waits, a lump of boiled cabbage wrapped in yesterday's bread crust, and a sliver of hard cheese that's more rind than nourishment. You head toward the Seine, bucket clunking gently against your thigh. The river's edge is quiet now, traders gone, laundresses between loads, barge workers taking their own midday pause. You find your usual spot, a low, crumbling ledge beside a mooring post stained with centuries of rope and silt. You sit with a grunt. Your knees crack. You ignore them. Unwrapping your meal, you bite carefully into the cabbage. It's bland, but warm enough to be remembered. The bread crumbles a little. The cheese resists. You chew slowly and let your eyes wander across the water. The Seine is thick and greenish today, swirling lazily beneath an overcast sky. A barge floats past, its pilot half asleep, legs dangling over the side like he's forgotten he's steering a boat. A gull calls overhead. Somewhere upriver, a dog barks with great moral certainty. You sip from your waterskin and lean back, broom across your knees like a lazy knight's sword. Here's your mainstream fact. The Seine was a central artery of Parisian life, used for transport, trade, washing, and waste. Riverbanks served as resting spots for all manner of workers, from chimney sweeps to stonemasons to you. You've watched this water every day for years. It never looks the same twice. A fish jumps. You blink. That's rare. More often, it's floating things that catch your eye. A loose shoe, an empty bottle, a flower crown from a street festival long gone. Once you even saw a full wooden chair drift by like a lazy royal on a pleasure cruise. You finish your food and brush the crumbs from your lap. A breeze stirs the river's surface. Your boots feel heavy with damp, your shoulders tight from the morning's work. But for a moment, you are still. A kind of peace that doesn't ask for applause. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Parisian street sweepers carved small marks into the ledges or trees where they took their breaks. Personal graffiti long before the term existed. A notch here, a symbol there. You've scratched a tiny broom into this ledge just once, years ago. It's still there, worn smooth but yours. A small boat tied nearby creaks gently. You watch a rat scamper across its deck, pause, sniff, then vanish into a coil of rope. He has a job too, you suppose. You rise slowly, every joint offering a lazy protest. You stretch, gently twist your back, and breathe in the smell of damp stone and old riverwood. Time to move on. Lunch is done. The market is behind you. The afternoon is full of new messes waiting to be discovered. You lift your bucket, your broom, and your weary legs, and return to the city's belly. Because a clean street never stays clean. Not for long. You don't make it 10 steps past the river before the smell hits you. It's the dung cart. You know it before you see it. An unmistakable blend of manure, hay, and the faint twang of something that used to be food. You round the bend near Rue de Bièvre, and there it is. The old wooden cart pulled by a sagging mule, listing slightly to the left, trailing behind it a river of wet reminders that horses are the city's most abundant contributors. The man driving it, Old Foray, you think his name is, waves as if this is a perfectly ordinary parade, which, to be fair, it is. You wave back. Because at this hour, dung haulers and street sweepers are on the same team. And the enemy? Gravity. You begin your slow dance behind the cart. Not too close, you've made that mistake before, but not so far behind that the droppings have time to harden into little street sculptures. Here's your mainstream fact. Horse manure was one of the biggest sanitation issues in early modern cities. With thousands of horses moving through Paris daily, street cleaners had to manage mountains of waste. Literally. The worst spots? Steep alleys where droppings rolled downhill faster than your broom could keep up. You learn to sweep fast and sideways. It's a technique born of trial, error, and ruined shoes. Old Foray pulls the cart into a side lane and shouts something about cabbage stew. You nod as if you understand. Now comes the real task, cleaning what's left behind. You grip your broom, square your shoulders, and begin sweeping the mess into neat piles beside the gutter. The worst part isn't the smell, it's the slipperiness. You nearly go down twice, catching yourself with the bucket like a dance partner you didn't invite. A nobleman on horseback trots past and sneers. You bow deeply, sweep a little faster, and mutter something about how dignity is a luxury no one offers with tips. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers tied bells or tin strips to their brooms to warn passers-by of slippery patches ahead, an early, jangling version of a wet floor sign. You'd considered it once, but the sound was too cheery for the task at hand. Further down the alley, a dog decides the pile you just swept is an excellent place to roll. You sigh. The dog seems happy. You are not. You sweep it again. And again once the dog finishes his interpretive dance of filth. Two children stop to watch you work. One holds a crust of bread. The other is barefoot, balancing on a stone like it's a stage. Why do you do that? She asks. You pause. Because the city doesn't clean itself. She nods as if that makes sense. Then they run off, leaving laughter and crumbs behind. You sweep those too. Historians still argue whether municipal waste management was considered a civic duty or merely an unfortunate necessity in cities like Paris. The truth, as you know, is that it's both, and often neither. You pass by a shopkeeper dumping gray water into the gutter. You raise a brow. He shrugs. You sweep it anyway. Because that's what you do. Because someone must. Because clean doesn't happen by accident. The sky is turning the color of old pewter as you trudge toward Rue du Foire, where the cobblestones are uneven and the walls lean like gossiping drunks. The drizzle begins as a whisper, just a few drops tapping your shoulders like an impatient child. You tug your shawl tighter and keep sweeping. By the time you reach the middle of the block, it's a steady mist. Not enough to justify shelter. Just enough to make everything slick and inconvenient. This street is famous for two things: pigs and preachers. You dodge the first as best you can. The second is harder, because just ahead, under the overhang of an abandoned cloth shop, stands a thin man in a damp robe, arms raised, voice lifting over the rain like a trumpet of doom. "Repent," he cries. "Repent, for Paris drowns in filth." You smile faintly. "Tell me something I don't know." Here's your mainstream fact. Street preaching was a common sight in 17th century Paris. It ranged from official sermons by sanctioned clergy to spontaneous soapbox rants by self-appointed prophets. Some focused on salvation, others on hygiene, often both. You sweep around his feet with careful dignity. He ignores you. His audience includes one old man on a barrel, 2 ducks, and a boy pretending to listen while chewing on licorice root. You make eye contact with the boy. He shrugs. You sweep on. The rain picks up slightly, and the cobbles start to gleam. Your broom handle slips a bit in your grip, but you adjust. Muscle memory takes over. Sweep, lift, shake, repeat. You turn the corner and, of course, walk straight into a half-spilled basket of carrots. Someone's cart hit a stone, and now the street is decorated in orange confetti. You sigh. Then you get to work. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers began carrying small wooden tongs or bent sticks to retrieve food items without touching them. Not because of germs, they didn't know the word, but because carrots rolling in gutter water are nobody's friend. You scoop, sweep, and return the still edible ones to a grateful vendor, who nods with surprising warmth. "Mercy," she says. "You're quicker than the saints." You try not to smile too much. Wouldn't want to ruin your grumpy aesthetic. Down another lane, you hear fiddles. The kind of lazy afternoon music that sounds like it was written by wet shoes and hope. A small group of musicians huddle under a cloth awning, playing to an audience of chickens and one dancing man with questionable coordination. You pause to enjoy the music, just a few seconds, and tap your broom lightly to the rhythm. Then you sweep a ring around the crowd, clearing onion skins, a broken pipe stem, and 3 spoons. Where did the spoons come from? No one knows. Historians still argue whether street music served a functional purpose in public morale or was simply tolerated background chaos. You decide it's both. Paris sings while it rots. You sweep to the tempo. A rat darts from one puddle to another, skipping across the stones like he's late for an appointment. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. Rude. The rain softens again, turning to mist. The sky remains gray, but the street begins to shine in that soft, oil paint way only wet cobbles can. You pause, let your shoulders drop, and lean on your broom. You take a breath. A moment of stillness. Then a horse relieves itself 2 meters behind you. You don't sigh this time. You just get back to work. The rain finally fades, leaving behind a city washed but not clean. The stones glisten like old pewter coins, the gutters gurgle with runoff, and your shoulders ache from the weight of a wet shawl that now smells vaguely like cabbage and river mud. You turn onto a broader avenue, Rue Saint-Jacques, a thoroughfare wide enough for carts, conversation, and all the noise Paris can muster. Today is no exception. The first thing you hear is a violin. The second is a frying pan being beaten like a war drum. Street sermons are over. Now it's time for street theater. You pass a knot of onlookers gathered around a man juggling fish. Real ones, not particularly fresh. The air is rich with laughter and disbelief. The fishman grins, then drops one with theatrical horror. A dog claims it before the applause ends. You sweep around them, careful not to ruin the show. Bits of paper, breadcrumbs, and a crushed cherry roll beneath your broom. A child drops half a pretzel and looks mournful. You hand it back with a shrug. His mother glares. The child beams. Here's your mainstream fact. Paris's streets were public stages in the 1600s, places where performers, hawkers, fortune-tellers, and jesters earned a living. It was loud, crowded, and occasionally brilliant, and always messy. Down the block, a pamphleteer is shouting about taxes and justice. Another is selling tiny portraits of the king. A third is balancing a goose on his head. You pass them all, sweeping. Nothing surprises you anymore. Not the man on stilts juggling eggs. Not the girl singing bawdy tavern songs while spinning thread. Not even the boy selling magic stones that are clearly just rocks with chalk on them. You buy one anyway. It costs a crust of bread. The boy grins. Now your broom is enchanted. You say, let's hope it works on goose droppings. He laughs so hard he hiccups. You keep the stone in your pocket, just in case. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some street sweepers were known to carry small lucky charms, feathers, bones, carved wooden animals. Not for power, for comfort. In a world where the street never stops moving, a little magic can go a long way. You stop for water at a public fountain shaped like a lion. The lion's mouth drips lazily, and a pair of washerwomen are already there, scrubbing hands and gossip. She says the baker's son ran off with a hat maker, one whispers. Better than a soldier, says the other. You nod politely as you fill your water skin. They nod back, cautiously respectful. Sweepers have ears. And memories. Historians still argue whether public fountains improved hygiene or simply served as social hubs. Either way, they're where the best rumors flow. And you've heard enough to start your own pamphlet, but you'd rather keep sweeping. At the end of the street, you pass a rat catcher with a sack over his shoulder and something squirming inside. He nods at you with the solemn gravity of one professional to another. You return it. He spits. You sweep. The fiddler from earlier has moved here now, playing to a different corner of the world. The tune's the same, but slower, sadder. You recognize it as one of those songs that always ends on a note you weren't expecting. You like it anyway, because that's the street. Never predictable. Never quite in tune, but always alive. You lean on your broom, stretch your sore hands, and think to yourself, not for the first time, that this city may be filthy, but it has rhythm, and you're part of the percussion. By late afternoon, the city's energy begins to fray. The laughter dulls, the arguments simmer, even the dogs bark less. You find yourself near the old monastery wall, just a low stretch of stone now, half covered in ivy, crumbling at the corners. It's easy to miss unless you've been sweeping it for years. You run your hand along its surface, fingers tracing names and messages scratched in by idle hands over decades. Some are prayers, some are curses. One just says, Jean was here, followed by a small drawing of a cat. You always liked that one. You begin to sweep, more slowly now. There's less foot traffic here, less trash too, but that doesn't mean it's clean. Dead leaves pile in the corners and scraps of cloth catch on the old stones like they're trying to become history. Here's your mainstream fact. Many parts of 17th century Paris were layered over older ruins, from medieval walls to Roman roads. Street sweepers like you unknowingly cleared paths atop centuries of forgotten lives. You pause near a missing brick. There's a tiny hollow inside. Someone once tucked a rolled scrap of paper there. It's long gone now, probably eaten by mice or rain, but you remember it. A poem, you think. Bad, but sincere. You keep sweeping. Around the next bend, the street narrows again. The buildings huddle close here, as if trying to hide something. You like this part of your route. It's quieter. Slower. You hear someone singing. It's not good singing, but it's heartfelt. A chimney boy on a rooftop, soot-streaked and squinting into the sky, belting out a tune about a girl named Mireille and a pie she never shared. You smile, he sees you and waves. You wave back with your broom. Here's your quirky tidbit. Chimney sweeps and street sweepers were known to form unofficial alliances. Both worked early hours, both got dirty, and both were universally underappreciated. Sometimes they shared meals, jokes, or warnings about angry dogs. You and the boy have swapped crusts more than once. You pass a pair of masons arguing over brick sizes, and they nod as you go. One offers you a chunk of hard cheese as thanks for clearing their path the day before. You accept it with a grunt and a grin. It goes in your pouch. Tonight's supper just got less depressing. A cart rumbles past carrying sacks of flour. A wheel hits a rut and tips, spilling a puff of white into the air. You dart forward, sweeping the cloud before it settles, saving a woman's clean shoes in the process. She doesn't thank you. But she doesn't scream either. You count that as a win. You sweep past the bookbinder's shop where the same 3 loose pages have been in the gutter since Wednesday. Today you finally catch them. You fold them and tuck them into your satchel, not out of sentiment, but because you could use something dry to wrap your cheese. Historians still argue whether workers like you understood the legacy they left behind, or whether they simply endured one day at a time. But you know this much. The job isn't about glory. It's about showing up, and sometimes about not letting a banana peel take out a bishop. That happened last year. You still think about it when you pass the cathedral steps. You pause beside a quiet corner and stretch your arms, looking down at your broom. The bristles are shorter now, the shaft stained, but it's yours. You give it a shake, wipe the handle with your sleeve, and prepare for the final stretch. Evening is coming, and the city still has secrets to shed. The sun is slipping, its golden light stretching long and lazy across the city's uneven rooftops. Shadows spill from corners. Lanterns blink to life one by one like reluctant stars. You shift your broom to your other shoulder. Your arms feel like warm lead. You've reached the chimney boys. They gather every evening near the bakery on Rue St. Paul, where the warmth from the ovens leaks into the alley and makes the cobblestones feel like summer. They're a rowdy bunch, barefoot, soot-faced, jackets 2 sizes too big, with grins too sharp for their age. They spot you and cheer. Broom man. You nod and tip your head like a tired courtier. One of them tosses you a crust of bread that you miraculously catch in your bucket. You're improving, he says, impressed. I'll add it to my resume, you mutter, but they don't know what that means. Here's your mainstream fact. In 17th century Paris, chimney sweeps were often children, apprenticed young, paid little, and sent up flues too narrow for adults. Their work was dangerous, dirty, and essential. Many befriended other street workers out of necessity and a shared survival instinct. You lean against the wall as they pass around a crust and a hollowed-out turnip full of something fermented and best left undescribed. One of them asks if you've ever found treasure. Only once, you say. A copper ring stuck in a gutter. They gasp. Did you keep it? You shake your head. Returned it. Wrong size. They boo. You smile. The conversation turns to sore knees and who has the worst blisters. You win, barely. One boy has a toe so blackened it looks like it's trying to retire. You stay a few minutes longer. It's easy here. No nobles, no buckets. Just warmth and laughter in a city that rarely gives either freely. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some chimney sweeps carved songs into the walls of flues as they worked, little rhymes or initials to mark their passage. One flue in Paris contained the same boy's name in over 20 chimneys. He was either proud or just lost. Eventually, the boys scatter. A bell rings from somewhere. The night shift begins. And so does your final round. You head toward the riverside again, where the wind picks up and the last light turns silver. The bridges are quieter now. Merchants closing. Musicians packing up. Lovers hurrying home with wind-kissed cheeks and crumbs on their sleeves. You pause to sweep a circle around a wine bottle, 2 dried plums, and an abandoned love letter. You don't read it. You don't have to. The tear stains say enough. Historians still argue whether Paris's working class found meaning in their roles or merely endured them. But in your bones, you know that sweeping isn't just about cleanliness. It's about presence. Proof that someone was here, that someone cared, even if no one noticed. You stop at a door you've passed 100 times. You don't know who lives there, but every week someone leaves a flower on the doorstep. Never the same kind twice. Tonight it's a violet. You sweep around it gently, careful not to brush it away. Because not everything left behind is trash. Some things are stories, waiting to be told. The light is fading fast now, melting behind chimneys and vanishing between roof lines. The streets are turning dusky gray, shadows lengthening like ink spilled on parchment. You begin the last loop of your route, sweeping your way through the quieter residential alleys, where the noise dulls and the wind carries the scent of old wood smoke and warm bread crusts. Your hands are sore, your feet ache, your back hums a slow, steady complaint. But your broom still moves, because it must. because there's one last patch of cobblestone that hasn't been cleared yet. You round a corner and nearly trip over a black cat licking the remnants of a meat pie. It hisses. You bow slightly. It returns to licking. Here's your mainstream fact. Street cats were unofficial city workers in their own right. In 17th century Paris, they were both pest control and omens, loved by some, cursed by others, but tolerated everywhere. You sweep past it quietly. The cat watches you go. You reach Rue des Ursins, where the windows glow with candlelight and the doors are shuttered against the chill. A washerwoman pours water from a second-story pail. It misses you by inches. She shouts, "Pardon," with the conviction of someone who isn't really sorry. You nod up at her. "Try again tomorrow," you say, half smiling. She laughs. "I will." You sweep the water into the gutter with practiced grace. Your bucket is nearly full. Ashes, bones, torn cloth, a broken pipe, one very determined beetle still crawling around like it owns the place. You keep it for now. A beetle can't do much harm. Probably earns more respect than you do. You pause under an archway to rest your arms. The sky above is a velvet dome, pinpricked with early stars. You breathe in, slow and steady. Your shawl is damp and heavy, but the air feels good on your skin. Almost clean. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers name their brooms. Not as a joke, but as companions. You've never said yours aloud, but in your head she's called Brune. Strong, bristly, reliable, like someone who shows up whether she's thanked or not. Brune's done well today. So have you. A man stumbles past you, wine-drunk probably, singing about a girl who left him for a baker. You sweep around his feet with the elegance of a dancer in worn boots. He stops, looks down, nods solemnly. "Good form," he says. "Thank you," you reply. Then he falls asleep against a doorframe. You leave him there. He's safer than most. Historians still argue whether Paris's night workers felt ownership over their city. You'd argue yes, because at this hour the city doesn't belong to the nobles or the poets or the powdered gentry. It belongs to the people with keys, with buckets, with brooms. People like you. You reach the little bridge near your quarter and stop at its center. The water below is slow and thick, glittering faintly under a crooked moon. The lamps along the embankment flicker like tired eyes. You rest the broom across your shoulders and stretch. It feels good. Honest. From here, you can see your whole day, backward and forward. The path you swept, the corners you cleared, the footsteps you erased, the ones you left behind. The street remembers you, even if no one else will. And you? You remember it too. You cross the little bridge and return to your own courtier, tucked behind the tannery, not quite on any map, but fully present in smell. The air carries a faint tang of leather, ash, and wet wool. Familiar. Unpleasant, but somehow yours. The stone steps to your garret creak like gossiping bones as you climb them. Each one announces your return, and probably your wait. You don't care. If the stairs want a complaint form, they'll have to wait until morning. At the top, you duck through the crooked door into your room. It's small. Always has been. There's a straw mattress against the far wall, a chipped clay bowl by the window, and a shelf you built yourself out of old broom handles. The window is cracked, but opens wide enough to let in breeze and pigeons, though usually not in that order. You drop your broom gently into its corner, lean your bucket beside it and slump onto the stool. Your knees crack again. Your shoulders sigh. You made it. Here's your mainstream fact. Most Parisian laborers lived in single-room dwellings shared with others, or alone if they were lucky or stubborn. Privacy was rare. Silence, rarer. But solitude? That could be found, usually after the last cobblestone was swept. You pull off your shawl and hang it over a peg, then your boots, then your belt. Your fingers are gray with soot, ink, and something that may or may not be jam. You don't want to know. You pour a little water into the bowl, splash your face, and wince. There's a scratch on your cheek, probably from that child with the licorice root. Or the beetle. You're still not sure. You sit on the mattress and pull out your crust of bread, the cheese, the hard apple from Madame Fournier, and the lump of roasted chestnut someone slipped you outside the butcher's. It's not much, but it's warm, and it's yours. You eat slowly, listening to the city settle. The bells toll once, somewhere distant. Horses clop by, slower now. A door slams, a cat yowls, a baby cries. Life continues in the cracks. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some sweepers kept small journals, not for literature, but to mark which streets were clean, which neighbors were kind, which corners to avoid during rain. You've never written anything down, but you remember every alley, every name, the boy who dropped the spoons, the chimney kid with the song, the woman who offered bread, the violet left at the stranger's door. You know this city like your own hands, scabbed, creased, a little stained, but strong. Outside your window, someone plays a flute. Badly. You don't mind. You lie down and stare at the cracked plaster ceiling, tracing shapes in the stains. A broom. A moon. A rat wearing boots. You're not proud of your job, but you're not ashamed either. You are the one who carries the dirt, so no one else has to look at it. And when you're gone, the city will still hum, still spill, still breathe. But tonight, it's clean because of you. You wake in the middle of the night, not with a start, but with the soft, slow realization that you dozed off before blowing out the candle. Its stub is now a pale puddle on the windowsill, smoke curling like a secret. The room is quiet. Too quiet. You shift under the blanket, scratchy wool and barely long enough, and let your hand fall over the edge of the mattress. Your fingers brush the floorboards, cool and familiar. You don't need to get up. Not yet. But you will. Because mornings wait for no one, and neither does trash. But for now you listen. To the creak of old wood, the rustle of pigeons on the roof, the deep, almost holy silence of a city caught between dreams and dawn. Here's your mainstream fact. Paris never truly slept. Even in the 1600s, its streets had rhythms that pulsed through every hour. Bakers before sunrise, thieves at midnight, and sweepers like you bridging the spaces in between. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed. Slowly. Carefully. No rush. There's a crust of bread on the shelf. Your emergency loaf, now more rock than food. You break off a piece with your teeth and chew absently. It tastes like yesterday, or last month, but it fills the space. You glance toward your broom in the corner. Brune, waiting like a patient friend. You'll pick her up again tomorrow, again and again. Because cities are like people. They shed, they stumble, they spill. And you? You're the quiet keeper of order in a place that rarely notices it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some street sweepers believed it was bad luck to leave your broom lying on its side overnight. You always prop yours upright, in the corner, bristles down, handle against the wall. Just in case. You lie back down, arms crossed behind your head, staring at nothing. Outside, a soft wind brushes the rooftop tiles. Somewhere, a drunk sings the wrong verse to the right song. A dog replies, unimpressed. The city is breathing again. You exhale, and wonder, not for the first time, if the streets remember you as well as you remember them. Historians still argue whether the small lives left any mark, but you know the truth. You didn't clean the city to be remembered. You cleaned it because it needed to be done. And sometimes, the only monument to a life is a clean path where none was before. You close your eyes. Let the dust settle, let the noise fade, let the scent of damp stone and baked bread dissolve into stillness. Let the weight in your hands, your broom, your bucket, your weariness soften, lighten, vanish. Breathe in. Slowly. Breathe out. Slower still. The street is quiet now. The lanterns flicker low, the shutters are closed, the boots are hung, even the cats curl tight beneath the eaves. The city still hums, of course. Paris always does. But it's a different hum now. Low, warm, drowsy. Like the last notes of a lullaby. And you? You've done enough for today. Let the footsteps fade behind you. Let the corners of Rue Mouffetard blur in the dark. Let the ghosts of spilled wine and dropped coins slip into dream. The world turns, whether it's tidy or not. But tonight, it's just a little better because of you. You don't wear a medal. You don't need a monument. You just sweep and sleep and wake. And somewhere in the narrow spaces between forgetfulness and history, your work whispers, I was here. So rest now. The broom can wait. The cobblestones can keep their secrets until morning. You've done your part. The story is told. The streets are quiet. The world is listening. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.